Hello and welcome back to The Winning Agenda. My name's Jesse Muirman-Marshall, and today we're going to be taking a look at some of the love letters or homages to Magic the Gathering that are present in the Sorcery Alpha set. We're going to be specifically looking at the homages to the Magic Alpha set, and I was quite surprised actually. I knew that there were quite a lot of them, but I was surprised by some of the more subtle ones, or some of the ones that I'd missed. Some of the perhaps lesser known cards from MTG Alpha that have made their way in a very different form. Obviously, the game's completely different, but have been given a little nod and a wink in the Sorcery Alpha set, shall we say. And the first example that we've got here is, of course, the Mox into the Cause. So the Moxen are very well-known Magic the Gathering cards from Alpha. They're some of the, what are known as the Power 9. They're very well-known. Those of you who are Magic players, of course, don't need me to describe what the Moxen are, but I'm doing it for the benefit of our Sorcery players who might not be so familiar. So the Moxen are zero-cost artifacts on the right-hand side there. You can see they add 1 mana of their respective color, and they are extremely powerful. They give you acceleration, they give you ramp. I think early on, people did know how good they were, but of course, because of the nature of Magic, there was no internet. These cards were relatively difficult to come by as rares in Alpha, and there was no expectation in terms of deck building rules and competitive formats that people would optimize or min-max their decks. So these were sort of little diamonds in the rough. They were jewels that were hidden there in the Alpha set that were extremely powerful and potent, but were perhaps a little undiscovered in terms of their power and potency. The Cause in Sorcery, you can see on the left-hand side here, and we'll cycle through the others as well, cost 1 instead of 0, which is a crucial difference, but they provide the Sorcery version of mana, which is in the circle, so it provides 1 in a circle, which is 1 mana to its controller, and it also provides Threshold of the respective color, which is effectively like providing a colored mana, if you like. So these are some of the more direct nods, both in terms of the art, the theme, and the mechanic. Of course, costing 1 rather than 0 is a big difference, and that was a concession I think that was made during the playtesting. You can see throughout the series of 4, there's only 4 colors in Sorcery, so we've got 4 rather than 5, and I've tried to pair them up as best I can between the Cause and the Moxen in terms of the artwork. They're of course not direct parallels, and poor old Mox Pearl gets left out. But you can see here, for example, you've got a relatively somewhat similar looking jewel, rectangular jewel, on the Amethyst Core and the Mox Emerald, for example, to give you just that little nod and a wink. It's just an homage. So that's the first example, is the Cause and the Moxen. The second example is a really iconic card from Alpha MTG. So here is the Sorcery version. It's a 2-cost, deal 3 damage to a random unit at target location. And this is a good example, I think. Of course, Lightning Bolt, 1 red mana, 3 damage to any target. So in Magic the Gathering, you don't have the grid, and this is one of the big differences you'll see as we go through these cards. And indeed, all the rest of the cards in the 403 card Sorcery Alpha set, a lot of them refer to the grid, to movement, to all these sorts of things that are just not relevant concepts in Magic. But these cards that I've got on this list are the ones that, despite the very different game system and the fact that Sorcery is of course played on the grid and has all sorts of different mechanics and rules, these are the ones that are able to be best approximated within the Sorcery rule set back to their MTG Alpha roots, I suppose. It really evokes, of course, the artwork, that kind of brooding blue background, the clouds, the lightning bolt striking down, and of course that iconic Christopher Rush artwork on the MTG Alpha lightning bolt. Pirate Ship is another one. So these sort of blue creatures from early Magic the Gathering were not the most powerful. Pirate Ship is, ironically, one of the ones that kind of works a little bit better amongst these sort of island home type creatures. The Magic version was a 5-cost, tap to do 1 damage to any target, so it could ping. Cannot attack unless opponent has islands in play, though its controller may still tap. Pirate Ship is destroyed immediately if at any time controller has no islands in play. So the Pirate Ship in Sorcery sort of takes this concept, which never really works that well in Magic, because this idea of what lands you have in play, what lands the opponent has in play, it just became very, you didn't want to put these cards in your deck unless you could make them have islands in play, and then at that point it was sort of too many cards to get the combo off. You might as well just play a different creature. Pirate Ship in Sorcery is water bound, so it's got the sorcery version of this restriction, but because of the nature of how sorcery plays out, you can sort of control its usefulness a little bit more. It's always going to be able to block. I guess Pirate Ship can do that as well in Magic, but there are more effects that reward you for your opponent's sites being flooded or turned into water sites in sorcery than there were in early MTG, and so Pirate Ship gets a little bit more utility. It's still, ironically, despite the fact that it is more powerful, it's more aggressively costed. Like, it's a 4-cost 5-power minion, which is very aggressively costed for sorcery creature/minions. Despite all of that, as it has played out, it still suffers from the same I need to combo with myself by having something to turn my opponent's sites into water sites that Pirate Ship and those Island Home cards had in early MTG. So that's kind of the Homage has sort of played out too perfectly in a way, in that the same mechanical issues that occurred in an MTG context, despite sorcery being a very different context and having this site layout and everything else, has sort of recurred a little bit with Pirate Ship and the other waterbound creatures. So this is another one. The art is in this one is also very clearly an homage to the original version. You've got the Selfsame Simulacrum on the left, the sorcery version, and then Clone on the right, the iconic copy creature, with that Julie Barrow art that's sort of comic book and quite comical. And Elvira Shakarova's art on the left-hand side on the sorcery one, which is just gorgeous. So it's a 4-cost as well. It's got the ability to copy a nearby minion. So again, bringing in that sorcery mechanism, or mechanic, I should say, of caring about proximity, which is something that isn't present in MTG, but otherwise bringing across that same idea of you pay 4 mana and you get to copy something on the board. So that's a clone of a clone, if you like. Fireball. So this one is the art and the concept is very similar, but the execution is actually quite different. Art, concept, and name, of course, quite similar, but the execution is actually quite different in terms of how it plays out. So whereas Fireball is an X spell in MTG, so you can pay X and famously channel Fireball, that combo in Alpha where you could dome your opponent for 20. Fireball in sorcery is a bit more tame. It's just a 4-cost, shoots a projectile, which again, a sorcery mechanic that doesn't exist in MTG. It travels along one of the lines in a cardinal direction on the board, and it deals 4 damage on impact to the first thing it hits, and 2 damage to each other unit at that location. So a little bit tamer, can't quite get up to lethal on its own, but still a nice little homage. Disintegrate, again, we've got identically named cards. One's an X spell and one's not. They function quite differently, but in the end, the effect of these two perhaps is more similar than the 2 fireballs. So Disintegrate in MTG is 1 and X for a burn spell, but if it kills a creature, then that creature is removed from the game or exiled and can't be regenerated. And that funny text in Alpha of return target to its owner's deck only when the game is over. Disintegrate in sorcery costs 3 rather than 1 and X, and it just gets to banish, which is the sorcery equivalent of exile. Target minion, again, nearby, that sorcery restriction, and everything it carries. So it gets rid of artifacts or relics that are held by the creature as well, or by the minion. So Disintegrate in sorcery, a very efficient removal spell, one of the only hard removal spells, if you like, in the Sorcery Alpha set, so a very powerful one, and definitely an homage there. We've got the sword and the armor and everything else melting away in the Sorcery Alan Pollack artwork, and of course that iconic Anson Maddox artwork with the sword, the shield, and everything else melting away and disintegrating. Disenchant is another one with a somewhat similar effect. So the sorcery version costs 2, destroy all auras and artifacts. So that's auras are effectively enchantments, if you like, but they have obviously some different mechanics in sorcery, and artifacts at target location up to 2 steps away. So it's got that proximity restriction, and the MTG version, of course, just the classic 2-cost target enchantment or artifact is destroyed. So the Disenchant in sorcery, a bit more powerful, kills all auras and artifacts at a particular location, so you can get a 2-for-1, 3-for-1 out of it, which you can't get out of Disenchant in MTG, but it's got that slight proximity restriction that the Magic version doesn't have. And I love the artwork on these two as well. The homage in the artwork to the circle, in the original Amy Weber artwork on Disenchant, but Elvira Pavlikovska's version, of course, depicting a church window shattering, which has a pretty cool kind of vibe about it as well in terms of disenchanting. Very different to the strange wheel of metal cutting a a prism of crystal, but some visual homages as well in there. The dual sites and lands. So dual sites are a classic MTG, classic, popular, iconic piece of MTG history, and the dual sites in Sorcery have a bit of a nod and an homage to them as well, and I think will be similarly sought after. So they're exceptional rarity, which is the Sorcery equivalent of uncommon rather than rare, so you'll be able to pick them up, thankfully, a little more easily than the dual lands from MTG. But if you look at the, gorgeous artwork on Lighthouse. The dual land artworks in Magic, certainly for me, and the land artworks in general, were one of the things that really drew me in as a youngster and as an early Magic player. They really made you sort of feel the vibe of getting into somewhere magical and mystical and otherworldly, whilst also depicting just really cool settings on which the events of the game are occurring. And I think the dual sites in Sorcery and all the sites in general, and the way you play them out on the board, as I've described in other videos, brings back that same sense, but it does it even more evocatively because you're placing them out in a grid on the board and sort of laying out the world on which the battle is occurring. And Lighthouse is just a beautiful piece of art that will be a wonderful part of any tapestry and any board that's laid out in a game of Sorcery. So of course there's a dual land for each of the element combinations in the Sorcery Alpha set, just as there was for each of the color combinations in Alpha Magic. Raise Dead is another direct title analog, but a combination perhaps of a few different Magic cards that have similar effects. So Raise Dead in Magic was a 1-cost return a creature from your graveyard to hand, whereas Raise Dead in the Sorcery Alpha set costs 4, so significantly more expensive, and it summons, which is basically cast for free, a random dead minion. So that's from both cemeteries or both graveyards. So you, rather than going back to hand, it goes back to play, so sort of similar to Zombify in Magic the Gathering, a 4-cost return to the battlefield sorcery effect. But the Sorcery Contested Realm version gets you a random dead minion, so it's a little bit less reliable perhaps than Zombify, but you can get something from your opponent's graveyard or cemetery, which is pretty cool. Replication/Copy Artifact. So these two, again, you've got a 2-cost spell that gets to copy an artifact. Replication copies one that's carried by the caster, so it's a little bit more restrictive because it's not any artifact in play, like Copy Artifact is, but most of your artifacts are going to be carried by a caster, can be your avatar, and most of the time you're going to play your artifacts, at least in the alpha set, being carried by your avatar. So Replication, a pretty cool copy spell, and one that I think is going to see a lot more play as the game develops. Vampires. So these two are a little bit different, but you can, I think, see the homage. So we've got a large vampire figure looming in the artwork. Slightly different styles between Melissa Benson's art for the Sorcery Dapperel Vampire and the Anson Maddox art on the Sengir Vampire, but definitely an artistic nod there. And in terms of mechanics, we've got 5 cost, we've got 4 power, and we've got airborne and flying. And then rather than having the classic Sengir Vampire ability to get +1/+1 counters, what Dapperel Vampire has is more of the modern MTG Vampire ability of lifelink effectively. So a great nod not only to Sengir Vampire, but to the long bloodline of vampires all throughout MTG. And the last one today is Will o' the Wisps. Or Wills of the Wisp. So we've got Wills of the Wisp in Sorcery, and we've got Will o' the Wisp in MTG Alpha. They're both 1 cost. The original Will o' the Wisp in MTG Alpha has flying and regenerate, so it's sort of a sticky blocker that can block most things in the set and still hang around to live to tell the tale. And Wills of the Wisp in Sorcery Alpha sort of has a similar ability. It's got Void Walk, which is a similar, well, perhaps not similar to flying, but it's another ability that gives it some mobility. And then it's got this ability when it blocks, so when it's attacked, which happens in combat, so if you defend with your creature or with your minion, in Sorcery, it will actually be then attacked by the attacker. And then the Wills of the Wisp can teleport to a nearby void or location to evade the attack. So similar to regeneration in early MTG, this ability to teleport away gives them some additional mobility, but also the ability to stop themselves from dying. So that brings us to the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed. It was just a short little one to give you a taste of some of the similarities, if you're a Magic player, between some things that you're familiar with, some of those old nostalgia hits all the way back from Alpha that you might find hidden in your packs of Sorcery Contested Realm Alpha. These are little nods, little homages that evoke that little bit of nostalgia and give you that little feeling of familiarity as you open up and introduce yourself to a brand new card game that, as I said, has a massive 403 card set with lots of things that are completely new and different to Magic. But I think having these little nuggets of familiarity and nostalgia really helps to cement the feeling of the old school vibe. And just nostalgia in and of itself it's a hell of a drug, and it's a really fun way to enjoy yourself when you're playing the game. So thanks for watching. If you're enjoying our sorcery content, do make sure that you check out the Avatar of Earth deck tech, which I posted a few days ago. We've got a competition there where you can win 1 of 3 Alpha booster packs, thanks to Eric's Curiosa, that we're giving away. And just in general, if you're enjoying the content, please do like and subscribe to the channel. It helps to get the videos out there. And if you do want to support the channel, you can also join as a member as well to get access to some additional giveaways as a thank you for your support. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you very soon with the prize draw for the 3 booster packs in a few days' time.